Aloha, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much. It's been a little bit of time since we've done one of these live ones, and I forgot how many pieces there are. My name is Andrea Nandoskar, and I'm the Education Program Manager at Historic Hawaii Foundation. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly for joining us this evening for a talk story with the director of Kaipiha na Loko Iʻa and community stewards of 3 of the fish ponds featured in this beautiful film. We look forward to learning more about the importance of Loko Iʻa and the work being done to restore them. A few virtual housekeeping items before we begin. Today's presentation is being recorded and also live streamed on the HHF YouTube channel and Facebook page, where it will be available for viewing immediately afterwards. Please type your questions as they come up in the chat box on the Zoom menu bar, and we'll do our best to address as many as we can, be it incorporated into the panel discussion if it makes sense, or afterwards in the Q&A portion of this evening's event. For those new to Historic Hawaii Foundation, we are a statewide nonprofit that helps people save historic places, sites that tell the stories of the multi-layered history of Hawaii. And we do this through education, advocacy, assistance, and protection of and for historic places. I would now like to introduce and warmly welcome Anne-Marie Kirk, the director of Kaipiha na Loko Iʻa, and the moderator for this evening's conversation. Anne-Marie is an award-winning filmmaker with the Hawaii State Department of Education. She also has her own production company, Blue Crater Media. With over 30 years of experience, her films touch on numerous aspects of Hawaiian culture, people, and life in Hawaii. Aloha and welcome, Anne-Marie.
Hi. Aloha.
Hi. I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Well, first of all, I was sitting here watching the people coming into the chat room. So I want to welcome everyone from, let's see, Kona, Texas, Makiki, Korea, Waimanalo, Kahului, Nu'uanu, Seattle, Wailupe, and even more coming in. Thank you so much for having this interest in this film and in the stewards that are here today to share about their different fish ponds. Kaipiha na Loko Iʻa comes from the Kaipiha series that I've been doing for the Department of Education. The first piece was Kaipiha Ka'ahele Ma Waikiki, which was a walk through Waikiki with historian John Clark. And now the next piece in this Kaipiha series is now Loko Iʻa. And Kaipiha means a full tide, a full sea. And I just thought there's so much about Hawaiian culture and the ocean that we don't get to really dive into. We might see it on the surface, but let's really dive in and see what it's about. Before we start our formal discussion today, I wanted to introduce Chris Cramer from Kaniwai Fishpond to do our opening oli. So Chris, if you can turn on your mic and open up your camera. And wherever you are, I know it's a digital age, but you can chant along an oli with Chris as he does our welcoming oli. So Chris, if you can turn on your camera. Hey, Chris.
E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna noea o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna noea o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna noea o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e.
Thank you, Chris. That was so beautiful. And to hear you do that opening with the vision of Kaniwai behind you, Kaniwai Spring, was beautiful. I'd like to next introduce the steward and the kia'i of Paia'u Fishpond in Iʻa. That's Kehaulani Lam. Kehau, could you turn on your camera and bring on your microphone? Hi, Kehau.
Aloha.
All right, and then the next person I'm going to introduce is the steward and kia'i from Huilua Fishpond in Kahana, and that's Kahiau Wallace. Kahiau, if you could turn on your, yes.
Hi, aloha
Hey.
nui kako.
Awesome, awesome. So there's a lot for us to talk about today. I also want to say there's a fourth fish pond in the series, and that in the show, excuse me, and that's Waikalua Fish Pond. When we started to do this kind of idea of talk story, it was going to be just one or two of us, and it kind of expanded. So we got to the point where we couldn't add anybody else. But I just want to say Waikalua will be talked about in here. We have a clip for you to see of Waikalua. And we all hope that you watched the film and that you enjoyed it. So I'm going to start my first question to Kehaulani. So Kehau, why did you get involved in this work?
Why did I get involved in this work?
I know.
Okay.
At Kahiau.
Well, before we start, I just want to say mahalo nui to you, Anne-Marie, Kirk, for capturing all of the stories.
Oh, thank you so much.
People in the places, so beautiful. And also a deep mahalo nui to Historic Hawaii Foundation for helping us to bring forth this beautiful story. I got involved with this practice of malama Loko Iʻa because I love my community. Aiʻa, Kalawao, Ewa, and Hawaii. And because of a lifetime of being raised by kupuna who devoted themselves to service and to perpetuating the practice of aloha. Kupuna who was the last konohiki of the fishing shrine at the mouth of Pu'uloa. Kupuna who worked for 40 years on the shores to raise and feed our family and tend our ancestral lands in Aiʻa and hold on to them. And kupuna who helped perpetuate Native Hawaiian culture through the Civic Club movement. So when you raised in ohana like that for 9 generations of service and aloha, it's not really your choice. Yeah, they made the choice for us a long time ago, and they steered us in that direction. And when the Navy graciously called our community and us to come and help them, we answered.
Awesome, thank you. So you got involved before you even knew it, right?
Yeah.
All right, Kahiau, I have the same question for you. How did you get involved with Huilua Fish Pond in Kahana?
Aloha nui kako o Keo Kahiau. And my ohana comes from Kahana Valley. My mama is Sherry Lynn Leimomi Wallace, and she's the daughter of Danielle Ululeni Burney, and who's the daughter of Daniel Burney, and we all come from Kahana. But similar to Auntie Kehau, you know, we were raised here in Kahana, raised growing up at the fish pond, and my early memories of the fish pond is basically there just to malama aina, cut the grass, move bushes, pull out mangrove, and then eventually got into stacking pohaku and learning different parts. And actually, when I graduated from high school and I went to Kekula Kaiapunio Anuenue, I didn't want to do anything Hawaiian, to be honest. I wanted to try something else. And so my first year in college, I didn't do anything Hawaii. And then my second year of college, I found my way at Kaneohe, at the lo'i there, Kapapa Lo'i o Kaneohe. And then that reopened all the doors for me to come back home with Pai o He'eia, taking the fish pond class, Wahipano o Ahu classes. Just pretty much brought me back to doing everything at home, giving me those skills and the networking and all the ohana that's been there to pai us and kāko'o us and doing our work. Our kuleana always finds us. It's whether we want to carry it or not. And so my kuleana there is just to hold the space and build our community. And that's how I got involved, is just coming back in and being there, showing up. Yeah.
Perfect. And now, Chris, I have that same question for you. How did you get involved with Kaneohe Fish Pond in Kuleo'o?
Well, I was working with, you know, I was working at the school and kind of saw what was getting taught, but then I was at the time I was living on Summer Street, which there's a Loko Iʻa right there. It leads right into Kaniwai, and so you know, it's kind of you could see the direction that things were headed, where you know, it's like we have the future right there, or we could you know, we could at the time it was for sale, and so it's kind of like I didn't know about these things, but and then I felt like, well, I got to step up, because you know, we got to do what we got to do, right? So it wasn't like I had training or
You're right.
I wish I did. So I had to learn things in little pieces and kind of make a lot of mistakes.
Well, in that process, though, of making mistakes is the process of learning. And so with the three of you, one of the reasons I chose these different fish ponds, some are not very well known, but it's also the different relationships you have with the communities that you're in. So, and we'll get to that later in the conversation. I wanted to remind people out there to please send in questions. We will be taking them as we go through the process. And I see if some have come through already. We will address those as we go on in our discussion. Kehaulani, when you talked about the fish pond you're at, I wanted to show a short clip of Kehaulani at Pa'ia'u Fish Pond. And so I know Andrea has that video ready to go. It's about a minute long, but if we could play it, Andrea, just to give people a sense more of Kehaulani and the work she's doing, that generational line of work.
I'm actually the 8th generation of a family that has resided in this area since before Kamehameha arrives. And one of our ancestors, Mikalemi, was Konohiki of Aiea, and during his time was responsible for the ku'ahu. He was the caretaker of Pakule, which is at the mouth of Pu'uloa, at a place called Kapakule. So fish was in our family for a long time, but not just fish for eat fish, but to care for the fish, to steward the waters so that there was abundance. And now we step into that same space without even knowing that that's the role that we would play.
So Kehaulani, with that piece, you're talking about a generational responsibility and a generational line. Can you talk more about that that resource and being a kia'i when you have that family line that takes you right to that fish pond?
Yeah, thank you so much for that clip. They're all over here with me now after
Awesome.
I saw that. And actually my story is not just my story. Everyone who is helping to steward Pai'ao has that story. We all came in when the call was made. We all came in when the call was made. And I think we all didn't realize the extent of our genealogical connection until we had actually put our hand in the mud and the water and worked for some time. We have not been in the water for 3 generations. And so the skills that Chris Cramer talks about, makahana ka'ike, we are learning by doing. There are others in my family more skilled than I in the art of fishing. For real, awesome fishermen. But something about it, when our community, and that was the Aiea Community Association, and Claire Tamamoto, when she came forward in 1999 and was trying to bring us all together to really lift up the important places of our community. We were the last family that would come to community meetings who had been living there since that time before Mahele. And I purposely went to these meetings over and over again and told the same story, that we descend from kupuna who were there long before, so that people would know there was a story. And if I didn't do that, then the story, the narrative would only begin with the plantation.
Right.
And so really important for me to come forward. And I was blessed because my grandmother, she was still alive then. This is like 24 years ago. And she would come with me to the gatherings, and I'd ask her to please offer the pule. And it's probably the last time kupuna spoke in Hawaiian in public.
Wow. Wow.
Was when she did that. And so it was her grandmother, actually, her grandmother's husband, who was the caretaker of Kapakuli. And his connection was to care for the ahu, for the stones of hina and ku, and also to take care of the mano, the aumakua. And in this place, the fish from the ocean would also come. And that's what he did. So now you come 3 generations later, well, it's a little different now. But we stand in that space praying to him when we go in there, and to all of the ancestors, that they will return, and that we will have the knowledge and the wisdom and the power to create that space again.
So stewardship is not only the place itself, but it's stewardship to the cultural lines, right? That you're speaking about as well. So I know Kahiau, you do that in Kahana. Can you talk about the cultural resource and stewardship that you have at Huilua Fishpond?
Mahalo. And mahalo again, Auntie Kehaulani. She always has all this ike that she brings with her. And so I always appreciate having a moment to listen. And so for us here in Kahana, our valley is owned by the state. And so that's who we work with. And mahalo our grandparents and great-grandparents for leading the way and to ho'opa'a that space. One of our last konohiki was Pauahi, who was a kumuhula as well, and a kia i Loko Iʻa, and had the fishing rights to Kahana Bay. And so when we're down here, we just try to remember, like Auntie said, those mo'olelo and those ties. Our ohana comes from all over. We come from originally He'eia, then Hau'ula, Punalu'u, and then Kahana. And so for us, it's how to bring in all that community and try to work with the state to accomplish those things. I think in the past, there's plenty hurt feelings because of the way that Kahana was lost to the state. Different, how land changes hands over the years. And so, we either can keep fighting and fight and have that hostility grow between us, or we can accept what had happened and just ho'oulu. And so for us here at Huilua, we understand that, it's a space our kupuna raised us in. It's a space that our kupuna calls home, but it's also not just my space. And I know, like Auntie Kehaulani shares, everyone comes from somewhere. Everyone has experienced someplace. And so for us, that's Huilua as well. That, even though the state can try and give us guidelines, really our loyalty is to the Aina, and we do right by the Aina.
Yep.
And Huilua means to join two things or join multiple things. So when we start our morning with Piko, we always remind ourselves to Huilua, Huikolu, Huipoloa. So we join 2 things, 3 things, and then we keep joining all kind of things, because that's how our fish ponds will stand up again, stand erect, and that's how our lo'ikalo will open up, and that's how the waters will be cared for. So we get big fat fish in the bay and in our ponds. So as we work with the state, sometimes it's just to be mindful that sometimes they don't know, right? And very excited for the Kanaka that are working in DLNR now and DOFA in those spaces, because those are same people, our people. And if we're all practicing the same things, then we're all on the same page, no matter what entity we work for. So that's kind of where we come from, is working to Malamar spaces, working so we can stay here in Kahana Valley as lessees, and also Kia'i together.
Thank you so much, Kahiau. Now I'm going to take a different little idea with that question with Chris, and the idea of the cultural stewardship in an area that has been disconnected. So I was hoping, Andrea, you could play the clip now of Chris speaking about Mr. Lukela, who was once the Konohiki on Maunalua. And anytime you let that roll, that would be awesome.
When they would come to Maunalua, they're outside in the ocean, and the Hawaiians in this area, they're waiting for them. Papa Lukela was the Konohiki out in the bay. And you can imagine when this big, huge school showed up, it was a lot of excitement. That's what they've been waiting for. And Papa Lukela would be waiting at the makaha, and he would lift up the gates, and you would think that all the fish in the fish pond would escape, but that's not what happened. Instead, the big school from outside would swim against the current into the fish pond because they can smell that fresh water. So Hawaiians designed these systems so that all that fresh water would attract the fish to the fish pond.
So Chris, and that, what's going on in Kaniwai and in Maunalua is your connection to the mo'olelo of this place and learning stories about like Mr. Lukela. Can you talk about the community activity of fish ponds and what Mr. Lukela represented and how you represent it today? You're doing a different type of fishing with education and bringing people in to learn about Kaniwai.
Of what Mr. Lukela represented? Or what?
Yeah, and to the community now that we have his story back.
Well, he's a hero for our community, and we need heroes. And he's definitely, that's Papa Lukela. He's that guiding light for our community that we kind of lost our way, you know, after we had this gift from, you know, since ancient times in our community, this beautiful, massive fish pond, this Loko Iʻa, and to learn how Papa Lukela managed the whole system all the way to Makapu'u from Maunalua, and you know, that I think he inspires us as a community to by his example, and you know, the way his you know, Auntie Sandra talks about his mana guiding this great school into the Loko Iʻa, and so you can kind of imagine this school is as far as you can see, and he's guiding them into the bay, and that must have, I mean, just be incredible, and him navigating by the stars and all these stories that have been passed down. So I think it gets us asking questions. So, well, why isn't that like what's happening today, right? So when we hear those stories, it can kind of readjust the conversation.
Mahalo, Chris. I was wondering, Kehaau or Kahiau, what are the stories from the kupuna you have in your areas that are helping guide you guys now in your stewardship of your fish ponds or your Loko Iʻa? Kehaau, Kahiau? Let's go to Kahiau first.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay.
Oh, I was like, you go, I think. Well, so some of the mo'olelo, like, sorry. Some of the mo'olelo we have of our konohiki. One that stands out with Pauahi is his ability as well to talk to the fish, kind of raise them. He had one special fish that actually was his fish that went out to gather everybody, all the other fish people to come in. And I believe his fish's name was John Boo. And so when I think about that, and you know, we also know that kupuna fed fish, kupuna fed our sharks, kupuna fed pua'a, these animals, but the relationship they were able to build because they were with them all the time. It's a reminder for us. We hear sometimes like aloha aina is not just a hashtag, Loko Iʻa not just a hashtag, but it's an everyday thing. And you know, in today's world, we some people just cannot, because we are pa'ahana with so much stuff, but our kupuna were able to do these things because they were in touch, because they were there every day. You can guide in i'a. If you're with them every day, you make the time, you know. And so it's a reminder for us, you know, in guiding our things. Like if somebody asks us about the fish running in, and I'm not a lawai'a. I mean, I know how a makahau works for sure. But I feel more comfortable in a lo'ikalo, in the mud. But part of my kuleana is to malama space there. But also is part of that kuleana is to kilo, to know my space. So to be there often. And I think, you know, when we hear mo'olelo of our kupuna being able to do this wondrous things, you know, to pule for the rain, pule for makani, it's just that connection, you know. They're like, I don't know if you guys watch Avatar, but they're like, you know, the last airbenders. They're the avatars, but it's just making it a matter of time, you know, giving it time and giving it your pule and what's your intention. So it's a great reminder every time we hear this mo'olelo that if we make the time and we discipline ourselves to do so, maybe we can too, you know. And that we remember our kupuna and those things when the fish moving, and then just put in the time. So mahalo nui, Chris.
Thank you, Kahiau. Ms. Kehaulani?
I just like listen to you folks talk.
I need my camera on, right? I need my camera.
The thing is, this is about family also. And when I say family, I'm not just talking about my personal family, my community family, but the family of the whole island. And I shared previously about how these are individual ponds in individual ahupua'a, but we're all connected. And we have always been connected. And so part of this, the mo'olelo that guides me is to really lift up that connectivity, because we're living in a time that kind of rewards competition and doesn't really recognize these incredible, ingenious spaces as vital to our sustainability.
Right.
It's kind of like, oh, it's a cultural thing, so put it in the cultural column. But it's more than that. It actually, at Pa'aio, what guides me, and I'd like to actually honor the kupuna who I have who come there to help us, who are descendants of the pond from Mahele, and even all the way up to the originator, who is Kalani Manuia,
Yes.
the Mo'i Wahine, 400 years ago. And Auntie Verna, Takashima, and Uncle Solomon, Apio, and their ohana, they come. But they didn't come, when they first came, they didn't know that their ancestor was the Mo'i Wahine, Kalani Manuia. They came because they called. And since they've been there, they've learned that, and it touches them, just as it touches the other lineal descendants whose aina were surrounding the pond, such as Kupihea, such as the Aluli Ohana. These are the people who were raised there at the pond. So I go back to the Mo'i Wahine, to the very beginning of the creation of this pond for the story that I feel drives me. And that is because she was the second Mo'i Wahine. Her mother was the first. She received as her legacy from her kupuna the ahupua'a system. And when she stepped into the space, and this is when the settlements are growing, and you know, most of the settlements I think had come already, and the population is huge, right? It's huge. And people need to make sure that they have food to eat, place to rest, water to drink. And so she makes it her decision to build the fish pond and to start building fish ponds around Pu'uloa, Ke'abalau'o Pu'uloa, Pearl Harbor. And she does this having been living, born and raised in Kukani Loko, but she moves to Kalawao. And from this space, she builds the ponds, and she governs for 65 years in peace. No war. We know what it's like in this moment to have scarcity, right? We know when we've been challenged, you got to run to the store and get whatever it is we need for what is coming. We see the lines. We hear about all of that, right? She taught us what it means to be a benevolent leader, what it means to care for the people, what it means to have the long view of creating something that will last 400 years, And so the message that I take away from her, and we're still learning this, Anne-Marie, every day, we don't know everything. She was almost lost to history. If the Navy had not done this project, there's very little about her. But because we step in now, her stories are coming out through her descendants and through us just being there and seeing the same sunset and seeing the same moonrise and seeing the oysters return and the fish return and the birds return. We get to see through their eyes, but not fully, because we've neglected for so many years.
Well, Kehaulani, that idea of the long view, I mean, that's what the work that you all are doing. It's the long view. So the work we're seeing being done today, we don't know how it's going to blossom 100 years from now, just like 400, 500, 600 years ago, right? That they had no idea we would still be talking about these ponds today. So it's not only the building of the fish ponds and the ideas, but it's the building of a way of thought, I would think. And speaking of building, that leads us into a part of the film. And by the way, I wanted to say that we will be getting to questions later, but please send in your questions. But in speaking of building, and it's a part of Loko Iʻa that I think a lot of people really didn't understand how the walls were built in a fish pond. So I'd like to now, Andrea, if we could play the piece by Kahiau at the beautiful Huilua Fish Pond about the building of the walls.
There are different parts of a wall. First is our pohaku niho. So pohaku niho are the foundational stones, but when we translate it, pohaku is rock, niho is our teeth. And so like our teeth is rooted in our gums, we do root the pohaku niho into the sand or dirt or ground wherever you're building. And on top of that is our alo. Every pohaku or every rock has a face, yeah? So we look for the face and it's supported by our panihakahaka, yeah? And those are smaller rocks. In our case, we use smaller, rounder rocks that we wouldn't use as a face. In other fish ponds, a lot of people use haka as coral. But because we have a lot of wave action, we use stone because the waves will just break down the coral and move it around too much. And to cap all of that off is the papale, our capstones. So papale is like a hat. And so when we cap the wall, then it's pa'a. When you leave it open, then it's open to the elements to knock it down. So it's very key that all these things line up together. And always remember too that no matter how big or small the rock, it all has a function. So we do have alakai that we have out on the wall. And so that's to just ensure that one, we're building correctly and that it'll be functional. And then two, that we hit our goal, whether it's in footage or height, and to keep our wall straight. Yeah, our kupuna are very, very meticulous, and they're very maiau and ma'e, very neat and clean. We try to be the same way.
So, Ms. Kahiau, what do you feel when you see that line of people working at the wall at Huilua?
I miss them. Yeah, miss the people and miss the community of people that would come up and help us. And we still have smaller work groups, but we would have big gatherings during the summer, our Aloha Aina work day, where we can move big loads of pohaku. And even in moving pohaku and you know, when we began to seriously kuho, the ho'o kuho, our kuapa, we were rolling in pohaku that had been washed away from you know, various tsunamis. And so just that kokua and kākoʻo and knowing that there's other people wanting to come help and learn, definitely miss that. And then as I see the faces, you know, and I see some of our ohana here on online watching us tonight. Shout out to Kinohi. But even looking at, you know, sharing this time with Auntie Kehaulani and Chris and every year we have our Hui Malama Loko Iʻa conferences where we all would gather on different islands and, you know, go out to those different fish ponds and kokua. And it's always it's either cutting back mangrove or cutting back bushes and then restacking pohaku. And so it's always a constant reminder when we're out on the wall that the pohaku that we're touching, that has fallen and then we're rebuilding, we're touched by the kupuna that lived in that space. And when we think about just Oahu covered with Loko Iʻa along the coastline, it's definitely something to be proud of that our ali'i could gather, or that our maka'ainana could gather, but that our ali'i and their kahuna could see these things, foresee these things, can utilize that area, that muliwai, to create these walls. You know, it's an art to be able to uha uhumu pohaku. Super frustrating for me, and I mentioned Kinohi because she's always been the person to ko'o me when I didn't want to do it. I'm good at sorting. And I know exactly what pohaku you want. Do I want to build it? Nah, I don't want the stress, but we got to, right?
Well, Kinohi
yeah.
I was gonna say before, Kinohi just jumped online and said you're her shiro, her hero. So go on, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought.
Well, and then likewise, you know, and then you know, especially when we look at our foundation stones, our niho of people that we choose to be around us so we can all do this work together. There's definitely so many niho stones that we place in our lives that help us build our niho on the wall. And mahalo, Kinohi is definitely one. Pai Pai o He'eia, definitely one. And enjoy that, you know, Pai Pai always has really good like little ditties that they put together so we can remember parts of the walls and how it goes. And so it's just a reminder of how much it takes a community, you know, whether you're building your Loko Iʻa, but it takes our community. It takes the kaiaulu. Yeah, that's like the thing. It's the kaiaulu. We have a kai that we need to grow, and we understand that if we don't have them, we can do it one man for sure. But I mean, but that's lonely and that's plenty work. But
yeah,
you know, if we can gather together and we also have to understand that, you know, it's not just for us, not just for one person, one ohana, but it's for the collective. And so that's like the memories that come back.
So Kahiau, like when you talk, you make me think it's not only the building of the wall, but it's also the building of knowledge that's locking together as the walls are being built. So you have multiple layers of things going on. And then you're in an area that, you know, Kahana is undeveloped, or Pa'ia'u is, there's development around you, but you still have a space. I'm curious, Chris, and how you had to rebuild the walls and get your water back for Kaniwai. Not only the call you felt to that place, but how was it there having to rebuild parts of the wall when other parts were cemented in? What was your experience?
Well, the actual rebuilding came much later. It was, I mean, in the beginning, we put a toll on the, you know, on the Loko Iʻa, we would get arrested for trespassing. So it was very, you know, that came much later, but, you know, it was a lot of faith at the beginning and for many years actually to in what the kupuna had shared with us, and like it was almost unimaginable when they were talking, but you could, I mean, you know, when Uncle Joe Young or some of these different kupuna that shared with us talked, I mean, and they even shared the pictures too. So but it was like kind of like going to the moon or something. It was so unimaginable that we could have that in our community. So, but and then sure enough, little by little, we you know, as we rebuilt, and then those, you know, all the small fish came back, and the larger fish, kind of like the kumulipo, and you know, one by one, and it was, and you know, with the fresh, with the, as the vai returned, and then so came the life, you know. So it was not it was a lot of faith at first. It wasn't like something we could see happening or immediate. So that was, yeah.
Thank you, Chris. You led me to, and there's a lot of questions and comments coming in, so I'll get to those. I just want to highlight the last fish pond that's part of Loko Iʻa, because now we're looking at the fish ponds individually, as we always talk about, they're connected. But I want to talk about the Ahupua'a system. So we're going to have that through Herb Lee from Waikalua. So Andrea, if you could play that piece with Herb Lee from Waikalua Fish Pond.
The southern end of Kaneohe Bay, and Waikalua Loko is situated between Kava Stream and Kaneohe Stream, where it empties out into the southern part of Kaneohe Bay. So the upa of Kaneohe extends from the top of the Ko'ola mountain range, and in this particular place, the highest peak in Kaneohe is known as Keahiakahoi, and it extends all the way down to the furthest edge of the reef beyond Mokapu Hill, on what we know now as the Kani Marine Base and Pu'uhawaiʻiloa. In the days of old, Ikawakahiko, all of the resources that you needed to survive were within your ahupua'a.
So as we look at her talking about that, we're going the whole piece of what that land would be. And I just want to, a comment came in that I just want to make sure I read. And this comes from Molokai from Watariti, who says, we need to feed our families. Our oceans and reefs are under stress. Our government needs to provide infrastructure like a hatchery to stock our ponds and to restock our reefs, which also led me to an idea. People have been asking, are fish going to be available from these ponds? There's a lot of questions about that as well. So we can comment on that, but I also wanted, when Herb is talking about a sense of place, we have a space we occupy, right, Kehaulani? And then we have the place that we occupy and the importance of that and how do we see it in a developed area. So that's the preparation, the way of looking at indigenous knowledge and perpetuating it. Does anyone have thoughts on that? I leave that open to someone to just jump on from the three of you.
Say, that's a really big question, but yeah. Jeff Pantaleo, the Navy archaeologist who identified Paeao as a historic site and then really rallied everybody to come, he has this big poster that he shows of the fish ponds that went from Waikiki all the way to Ewa. Mm. And there's so many of them that we don't know anymore in the urban landscape they were even there. I don't know how many people realize that where the convention center is today sits on a 10-acre fish pond that was once there. I mean, they're just underground, right? But the point is that they were these systems. And so when we go to Paeao again, I return to Mo'iwahine. Her kuleana was for the entire island. Right. So of course she lived within an ahupua'a, but she's Mo'iwahine. Her concern has to be for the entire island. And so the way that you see her governance is making sure that everyone has enough to eat. But to do that is not just the fish, right? It's not just the fishery, it's the uplands. The forest has to have water, fresh water flowing down because it's that harmony of the fresh water and the salt that create the beautiful space for all of the life to exist, right? So who can do that but a mo'iwahine? Who can do that but a government agency to bring together all the different agencies that touch the natural resources, right? And make sure that from the ahupa, from the top of the mountain to the water, everything is needed to recreate this system that is actually still there, but just waiting for us to reinvigorate, revive. And that would be phenomenal. I think I agree with what needs to happen on the reefs and the cleaning, but if we're really going to seriously revive these as, I don't like to say economic, because my cousin's family are the descendants of Papa Lukela. He was my great-grandfather's cousin, and they would talk all the time, right? And the story she tells about him is he would gather the fish in his cart to take it to market. And Sandy, I hope it's okay I tell this story if you're out there. But it's so beautiful because he would gather it in the cart and walk to market. And I don't know where market was from out there. But more often than not, by the time he got to market, his cart was empty because he gave it all away.
Right.
So by the time he got there, no more for the market. Even our kupuna, they had to kind of harmonize that market-based cash economy versus sharing-based economy.
So Kehaulani, but it leads me to a question, because all of us are in sync in understanding, you know, the importance of fish ponds, the importance of community, but how do we translate to get that enthusiasm in those government agencies who don't just look at fish ponds as cultural resources, but maybe part of the agriculture, or you know what I mean, or taking it out and looking at it and getting them excited about it, because they're the decision makers who are really going to make the difference. Kahiau or Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you know, there's been some close calls in the past where we've had mayors and you know, that get it or understand, and they really made a push in the past to get every Loko Iʻa into production, and not, you know, these are, it's not, we're not talking about aquariums or anything like that. These are to feed and to produce, right? So that's, we're not just trying to look at them or something like that. So yeah, that there's been efforts in the past. I mean, you know, you're talking about where food shortages during the war and things like that. So I think it just takes that one, you know, if we have leadership in the future that understand and you know, not just lip service, but hey, let's do this. You know, it's very doable. It just takes the you know, the willingness. And I just also wanted to go back to that, you know, just the purpose of these are public works projects. These are monuments to, you know, these sustainable monuments, not like pyramids in Egypt. These are, we can feed from these. So yeah, that was the whole purpose from these. So these massive public works projects.
So Kahiau, for example, do you see Huilua as becoming a fish pond that will be producing fish for community? Is that your goal?
I think that is a goal, to have Huilua produce fish, and it's more than capable to do so. But definitely, one thing that drives us is just for our baby fish to have a home, a space to rest. Our bay, our coast gets heavily fished, and so if our space can be used to help repopulate our kai spaces, because we also forget about that. You know, when we huki kalo and we get leftover huli, we can hoa them on the side bank, save them for later for the next patch or next planting. But how do we hoa these i'a? And so for us, the big drive is just for them to have somewhere to rest, to hide in the rocks, or to stay in the pond. And we have plenty baby fish in our Loko Iʻa. But it's like, you know, it's also trying to educate and it's even our own kanaka, like, you know, it's self-management on how much to take and how much you can sell, how much you can leave. You know, that manao of ai kekahi e kapi kekahi, you know, we take some to eat and then we save some for later. But definitely Kahana sees its share of fishermen. So if our i'a can have a few spaces to run, you know, just to take a break, you know, like, bro, leave them alone a little while, you know, and not just Kahana, you know, but sharing that ike, you know, like plenty people come this side and fish. So how can we also utilize our spaces just to make more fish? That's what we need. We gotta have safe spaces for them to spawn and just have their babies. So then our kai is never empty. We can keep it full.
So Kahiau, that kind of leads to a question that I didn't address it in the film because it kind of was taking me off the story that I was trying to tell. But part of the story is climate change. So you're not only protecting the pond, right, to have the little puas blossom, but climate change and how it's affecting the ponds. So at Waikalua Fish Pond, for those of you who saw the film, they actually had to build the walls higher for the first time in hundreds of years because the king tide was actually coming over the top of the wall at high tide. So they actually had to change the height. How do you see climate change affecting you, Chris or Kehaulani, on the ponds that you're at?
Want to go for that question? and take it out.
Oh, yeah, I don't think anybody is not considering that because most of the shoreline property is considered inundation zone.
Yeah.
Not even just the ponds, right? Waikiki, I mean, everybody's concerned about it when you see those maps.
Mm-hmm.
Those are symptoms, right? What's the main source of that is our dependence on fossil fuels, our overuse. To the extent that we restore these spaces traditionally, and then eventually restore the entire system, eventually, I think that is the long-term mitigation. It's true for that raising the pond. We've done that ourselves. The Uncle Francis, Uncle Bruce, Kahale, as they're building the wall, they've gone up, I think, an extra 2 feet. Now we didn't have any stones left in our original wall. They had all left. We had to bring in new stones, but they have taken that into account. But it's not just the height; it's the lack of the mixture of the fresh and the salt. Because even if you can contain the salt water, you still need full capacity of fresh water coming in so that they can mingle. Otherwise, no food, and it won't be the abundance that it was before. So I think very much so this is a climate change mitigation practice. I'm not a scientist studying that, but I do know the one thing. You see this picture that's behind me, you see that big rainbow that goes like that. It's like this eye. And in this area, there are always these rainbows. And I think to myself, why did Kalani Manuia move her kingdom to that spot? She could have gone anywhere on the island. She could have gone to Kahana. She could have gone to Maunalua. She could have gone anywhere, but she came here. Why? And I believe there's some kind of geospatial or some kind of climatic understanding that kupuna had of situating themselves in these environments that are climatically, that will allow them to thrive. So if we just follow our own queen, Liliuokalani, she did a beautiful job for us in leaving the gift of the translation of the Kumulipo. And while we have been kind of imprisoned during this last 2 years, I actually sat down and started reading Kumulipo at Paeau. And to try to understand, why are we having this challenge with this virus? Why is this happening to us? And I learned about this scientist in China who's been studying bats for 30 years. And the bat at that time was considered possibly the carrier of the pathogen. And so there's, I went back to read the Kumulipo, and the Kumulipo is the creation chant of our people. And it documents from the beginning of time, every animal, plant, fish that was created, that came forth. It starts with the coral polyp. We talk about the reefs, and the very first life form in the Kumulipo is the coral polyp. And then it continues all the way down for 7 eras. And all of these animals and plants and birds and fish are coming forth. And the human doesn't arrive until the 7th era. So really, all these other animals and creatures are our elder siblings. So we ask ourselves, what is the real source of this problem? The scientists in China asserted that it was overdevelopment that led these bats to have to go flee. And they, as a consequence of the trauma, they carry 500 pathogens or more. And that, so they're heavily burdened. And they pass that on to another animal or directly to a human. I went to the Kumulipo to read it all the way through. And the human comes in at 7, but guess what the last animals are that are created before humans? Anybody? In Liliuokalani's version, it's the bats and the god of the bats. So our ancestors knew something about harmony, balance, right, in the natural world.
And
And
Kehaulani, no, go on, I'm sorry.
No. So when we talk about climate change, we have to say climate change is the outcome. What is the source of the climate change, right? It's humans. It's humans. And I know not everybody believes that. But when I sit there at Kahiau and I see that when we removed all of what we put in there, meaning the people who came before and unknowingly turned it into a mangrove forest, and when you remove that, the fish come back. All the native fish, the native birds, the akulikuli growing, all in the bed of the mud. That's the wisdom that is in the kumulipo. So climate change, I think, from our perspective, is going back to the source of that wisdom and rolling backwards. Not going forward to say where my generations are in relation to the last one who came, but roll it backwards and care for the ones who came before us. And if we care for the ones who came before us, then they're going to care for us.
So Kehaulani, when you're talking about that and how are the fish ponds, how are they involved in this? I know at each of these fish ponds, it was the bringing back of fresh water that caused the change. It was fresh water that was blocked and then fresh water that was brought back that started the change here. So fish ponds are actually helping the things around them by bringing back that natural environment. So we have a couple questions from people about volunteering. At the end of the broadcast, or the showing, excuse me, there'll be a slide up that will have how you can volunteer, and you do not have to know what you're doing. All you need is helping hands. But one of the things I want to talk about is when people want to help, there's helping moving ponds, weeding, but there's real help that's needed financially to make these sustainable. And it's something that I know, Chris, you have talked about. Can you share more about having that financial help? And what people don't think about, there's pooling weeds, but hey, we got to get insurance, so we got to get gas money, we need tools. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. So I just liken it to, when we have the hiki come and I think, when you look at the makaha, there's a hapawai, and they like that half fresh, half brackish water, and that's their place in the Loko Iʻa. And then the hole hole, they like that more rushing water, and then the Kākoʻo, they like the kind of slack, tide. And Uncle Fred, he kind of pointed that out, and it's so true. And when we see that, and then it got me thinking. It's like same for the human beings. So everyone that comes to the Loko Iʻa, we all have a place, and we all have a a role that we can play. And we don't expect kupuna to be diving in and hauling giant pohaku. I mean, I think everybody has their the way they can contribute, and if it's financial, that's huge, and that sometimes so. But if your expertise is in dry stack pohaku building, or that's. So I think everybody has their place and their role that they can play. We don't all have to, pass rock, but it really moves the envelope. I mean, it moves things forward when we can get that financial support, because there are fixed costs that we all share, that in this day and age we have to pay out. And so we do need that support.
So Chris, it could be that your skill might not be pohaku building, but maybe you know how to write a grant. Maybe you're a photographer. Maybe you have, you can do some kind of even a PA system when you do a gathering, rather than putting out hundreds of dollars, maybe they can donate. So there are different ways. Very funny, I saw someone's question come in that said, what is the most delicious way to prepare the mullet? So people are already thinking about eating the fish. We have just a few minutes left before I turn it back to Andrea. And there's one more video I'm going to show, but before that, and if you could keep your answers brief, just because of the time, but you've all three of you worked on transforming the fish pond, but I want to know, how did the fish pond transform you? And I'm going to start with Kahiau.
It's definitely given me moments to just reflect and process what we're doing. But always our pule is that huilua and kahana will open up the path and we keep walking. And so my promise to my valley and my promise to huilua is always what you want. You open the pathway and I just walk it. And so huilua has brought together so many people. And that's the pule. What does the aina and what do our kupuna need to see happen that we can live? But definitely has been giving me that opportunity that it's not about just like Auntie said, humans, right? It's a Kākoʻo effort.
Thank you, Kahiau. Kehaulani, how did it transform you working at your fish pond?
Well, for one thing, I never thought I would be sitting here with you on this, Zoom or being on this television show. So I think I've always said it's been a dream come true for our community to be able to walk in there and work with Navy and all of the people who come. It's been a dream come true to be able to receive the benefit of the wisdom of Chris, Kahiau, the ones who have been doing this for longer. Uncle Herb cannot mahalo enough for help with us restoring our wall. But I think what it gives me is inspiration and hope. When I see the young people come and they answer the call to come and they enjoy it and they want to be there and they find out who they are there, that to me is transformative because I come from a background of Western education, right? College. And then I come there and I realize that Aina is our textbook. Aina is our textbook and our biggest tool is our heart. And that's how it's transformed me the most, is to have the deep love for Aina, for each other, for our communities. And I really do hope that we can leave this, if anybody wants to help think about a way that we can transform the whole system and resurrect it again, so that those of us who love to be in the water or moving stones or can do that work.
Thank you so much, Kehaulani.
That would be the greatest gift of all.
No, that's totally beautiful. And Aina is our textbook and our biggest tool is our heart. I think you're also a poet, Miss Kehaulani. Chris Cramer, how did working at Kaniwai transform you?
I think it kind of opened up my eyes and I didn't know what my values were, I think, until doing this. So, and then you know, and I learned through doing and kind of seeing what was right in front of my face, but I didn't, was kind of blind to it all. And just to kind of give you an example, like we have the kupa at the Maunalua Fishpond is about a mile from one end to the other. And to build that, you would have had to have thousands and thousands of, I mean, everyone, Lau Lima, working together. I mean, you could not, and then, I mean, it just would be impossible to have just a handful of people accomplish something like that. And so I think like learning those values and seeing and yeah, so it's kind of like that transformed how I see things and just in that way.
Thank you so much, all three of you. I just want to read to you from a comment from someone who's watching, from Vernon Viernes, who said, "We think we are working Aina, but Aina works on us," which is a beautiful statement. There's one last video I want Andrea to show, if she wouldn't mind. And for me, it's this is a celebration of the Anai. This documentary is a celebration of Anai that are at Kupuna 8 for hundreds of years, and we are a part of it. So Andrea, if you could play that last video, please. So thank you so much, Andrea, for showing that clip. Again, it's really been an honor for me to work with Kehaulani, with Kahiau, with Chris, with Herb, with all the people that are involved in this film. And also coming from the Department of Education, these are the types of films that come out of our office to reflect our community and lifelong learning, right? It's just not K through 12. So I asked that if the Kaipiha series, we have a show on Waikiki that you can catch on PBS Hawaii, as well as this film on PBS Hawaii. The next Kaipiha film will be out in the spring, hopefully, of 2022. Thank you everyone for your wonderful comments. We will be answering the questions that have come in that we didn't get to. So many beautiful things people have written there, so thank you so much. And I also want to thank Michelle and Andrea from the Historic Hawaii Foundation for making this possible. They reached out to me and wanted to do this talk story. They were so moved by the film. As a filmmaker, you're like, yes, but I know that comes from the people I have in the film and that celebration of the Anai Holo. If you haven't seen the film yet, it's on Vimeo for you to view. You can hear more of the beautiful wisdom of Chris, Kahiau, Kehaulani, Herb, and Kupuna that are there. I think there's about 20 different people speaking in the film. But at the center of the film, at the heart of the film, is the Anai. All of this great public work project that Chris has talked about, that Kehaulani says, Kalani Maunalua spoke to, that Kahiau today talks about bringing the pua back and creating a safe space. It comes from the Anai, and I honor the Anai through this film. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching this, and I'm going to throw it back over to Andrea. So thank you, everybody.
Wow. I'm kind of speechless. It's such a beautiful conversation. It's so important. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for moderating and for creating this beautiful film. Thank you to Chris, Kahiau, and Kehaau for the beautiful work, for the beautiful spirits that you are and the work that you're doing on behalf of all life. And thank you for being with us this evening and for sharing and stewarding your places and helping others to get involved and support efforts and build community. To our audience, we will share, I'm not sure if we're going to share it now, but if not, we'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone and we'll include the links there. I think that would be nice. I'd rather look at everybody's face right now in their beautiful fish ponds behind them. So we'll be sending it out within the next few days and we'll include the links and also links, Anne-Marie, to the other films that you mentioned. We'll also post this at historichawaii.org on the event webpage. And I just want to thank you, mahalo you all, and for all the beautiful work. And also just say to everyone and to our audience, if you would like to learn more about Historic Hawaii, please check our website. We do a wonderful e-newsletter weekly, thanks to my colleague, Beth Iwata, who's been curating that. For those who are receiving it, she's doing a wonderful job. We're helping her, but she's really curating it and she's doing a wonderful work. And we're sharing stories from all of you, which is what it's all about. We're here for all of you. And I really want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We hope you really enjoyed this presentation, and it's the beginning for you to learn more about these places and where you fit in and how you can Kākoʻo this effort. So, and I definitely would also like to thank my colleague, Michelle Kisik. She's been instrumental in providing event and technical support. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your evening. And please share this replays with your friends and family from the YouTube page and the Facebook page from Historic Hawaii. Mahalo nui loa. Ahui ho, everyone. Thank you so much.
Aloha.
Bye.
Mahalo.
Aloha.